Colonial Hangover Hindering Bharat's Cultural Revival. How Woke Consumerism Fuels Self-Alienation, written by Rathi Agnihotri. Despite a growing pride in Indian heritage, many Indians still seek Western validation in lifestyle, fashion, and language. This paradox, fueled by colonial hangovers and woke marketing, turns tradition into a performance and consumerism into cultural erasure. Abmanya Chatterjee's English August portrays rural and small-town India through the eyes of Agastya Sun, a young civil servant from the English-speaking urban elite who displays open disdain for anything authentically Indian. Sun, the hyper-westernized protagonist of English August, embodies the internalized colonial gaze that continues to afflict modern Indian society. He views his own country and culture with loathing, contempt, and quiet disgust. His outlook reflects a broader mindset shared by many Indians who, shaped by deep-seated colonial inferiority complexes, have consciously distanced themselves from, and at times actively dismantled, their own civilizational roots. What's more troubling is that they remain largely unaware of the consequences of their actions. A drive through small-town India today reveals some quietly telling patterns. Many bylanes are dotted with shops and establishments bearing anglicized names, many of which are borderline funny. You'll also come across coaching centers specializing in English-speaking courses, a booming industry in itself. With such coaching centers mushrooming in every corner of India, the quality of teaching remains suspect. Still, that doesn't stop Indians from gambling their hard-earned money in the hope that improving their English language skills would help them fix their life, or better still, make them a part of the elite crowd. While the inherent absurdity of the scenario often elicits goofy responses, the deeper layers of pathos and dark irony are rarely recognized, let alone seriously discussed. Centuries of invasions and colonial rule have given rise to a troubling psychological effect. Many Indians have come to internalize what can be described as a colonial form of Stockholm syndrome. Even as India has witnessed a significant civilizational and cultural revival over the past decade, the deeper psychological traces of colonialism remain difficult for many Indians to fully shed. This has created a striking contradiction. On the one hand, there is a growing pride in Dharmic identity, a rise in temple tourism, a renewed interest in civilizational roots, and an increasing global recognition of Indian culture. Yet on the other hand, in everyday life, many Indians continue to quietly aspire to Western lifestyles and value systems. This is a classic example of what V.S. Naipaul describes in India, a wounded civilization, a poignant reflection of the psychological and cultural damage inflicted on Indian society by centuries of foreign domination. The resulting inner conflict reveals a civilizational.
भाजपा सरकार ने विपक्ष पर आरोप लगाया कि हिंदुओं
Identity torn between revival and colonial hangover, between rediscovery and inherited mimicry. In response to this chaotic duality, the consumer culture industry has developed a kitsch aesthetic that turns Indians into imposters in their own land. From the hospitality sector to advertising, people are constantly bombarded with messages that subtly encourage them to abandon their own value system and imitate Western ideals. At the same time, it is the deeply ingrained colonial complex within Indians that makes such messaging effective in the first place. However, the consumer culture infected with the colonial bug is merely a reflection of the deeper rot within our collective consciousness. Indian consumer culture still smitten with the colonial bug, the elitist syndrome. India's elite hospitality culture often ends up as a comical parody of Western aesthetics, whether it's the ambience, interior design, overall vibe, service style, or even dress codes. In upscale cafes and restaurants, it's routine for staff to address customers as sir or ma'am, mimicking a colonial-era formality. In many establishments, employees are explicitly instructed to speak only in English with guests, even when the majority of the clientele are local and perfectly comfortable with Indian languages. To an outsider, the absurdity of such a scenario is immediately apparent, and it's not limited to the hospitality industry. In many Indian cities, it's common to see locals conversing with each other in English, even when they share a native language. For a foreign visitor to India, this behavior often signals a deeper issue, a perceived lack of cultural confidence or self-esteem. I was personally caught off guard when a Spanish friend once asked me casually during my student days at the University of Leeds, UK, why do Indians always talk to each other in English? Like most Indians, I didn't quite know how to answer that question. While outsiders can easily recognize the absurdity of such a situation, we as Indians have internalized colonial complexes to such an extent that it no longer strikes us as unusual or out of place. The urge to sever ties with one's colloquial roots and cling to the English language is a defining feature of middle-class anxiety in India. But it's not just about language. There's a deeper, often unspoken aspiration to adopt everything perceived as Western, particularly in lifestyle and cultural preferences. Terms like cosmopolitan or global have become euphemisms for a diluted, copycat version of Western sensibilities. Ironically, Indianness, which should naturally form the core of India's hospitality identity, is instead reduced to a curated novelty. It becomes a carefully packaged theme, treated more like a museum exhibit than a living cultural expression. As a result of these trends, Indians with more traditional values are treated as aliens in their own land. An upmarket restaurant in Delhi became the center of controversy in.
इसलिए आज भी सही आंकड़े नहीं मिलते कि कितने लोग मारे गए। लेकिन जब यूपी सरकार ने 1978 के दंगों की दोबारा जांच के आदेश दिए, तो कई पीड़ित परिवार खुलकर अपनी तकलीफ बताने लगे। इसी बीच देश में चल रहे सांस्कृतिक जागरण और संभल की विरासत को लेकर बढ़ती दिलचस्पी की वजह से मीडिया के कुछ हिस्सों ने भी इन घटनाओं पर फिर से लिखना और तथ्य सामने लाना शुरू किया। फिर भी वामपंथी और उदारवादी गिरोह लगातार कोशिश कर रहा है कि दंगों के हिंदू विरोधी पहलू और उनसे हुए बड़े पैमाने पर हिंदुओं के पलायन और जनसंख्या बदलने की सच्चाई को छोटा करके दिखाया जाए। आतंक का अड्डा बना संभल न्यायिक पैनल की रिपोर्ट में संभल में आतंकी नेटवर्क की मौजूदगी पर गंभीर चिंता जताई गई है। इसमें लिखा है कि यहां गैरकानूनी हथियार और नशे का कारोबार खूब चल रहा है। मीडिया रिपोर्टों के मुताबिक कई बड़े आतंकी संगठन और उनके लोकल नेटवर्क यहां सक्रिय हैं। कहा जाता है कि हरकत
2021 after a video surfaced showing an employee telling a customer that a sari was not allowed in the restaurant because it was not considered a smart casual dress. This led to immense social media outrage as netizens slammed the restaurant for allegedly denying entry to people donning the most popular Indian garment. In yet another such incident in Delhi in 2020, a woman was allegedly denied entry into a restaurant in Delhi because she was wearing traditional Indian attire. The woman reportedly shared a video in which the staff could be seen denying entry to her and another person by saying, "Ethnic is something we don't allow." In another shocking incident, a man wearing Tamil Nadu's traditional attire, a white shirt and veshti, was denied entry into a Mumbai restaurant owned by Virat Kohli. He later posted a video on X, calling it an insult to all Tamils and their culture. Discrimination against traditional Indian attire in the hospitality industry has become a serious concern, prompting even local politicians to take notice. In September 2021, a councillor from a Delhi locality submitted a proposal to the South Delhi Municipal Corporation, SDMC, urging the imposition of heavy fines on establishments that deny entry to individuals wearing traditional Indian clothing. The hospitality industry, on its part, attempts to justify the discrimination on the pretext that every restaurant or club has the right to establish its own criteria regarding the kind of vibe it wants to create for the establishment. It's a common practice among certain restaurants and clubs worldwide to impose dress code restrictions, creating a certain halo around their brand and cultivating an image of posh exclusivity. However, in India, the problematic aspect is not so much the imposition of the dress code itself, but the fact that this exclusive culture is based on a snobbish rejection of India's indigenous culture and lifestyle. When restaurants in the West cultivate an image of exclusivity, they brand certain elements of their own culture as exclusive rather than mocking it. In India, it's the exact opposite. The pressure to look and behave a certain way in public spaces and entertainment venues, driven by a hyper-westernized consumer culture, only worsens the cultural amnesia that many Indians already face. The result is a deep identity crisis that continues to haunt us, making it difficult to break free from the grip of a cultural Stockholm syndrome, even as our broader cultural narrative undergoes meaningful change. A write-up by Bharat aptly argues that India's cultural amnesia stems from the colonial education system introduced by the British, designed to reshape the collective psyche of Indians and serve as an ideological apparatus to dominate them across all spheres. Post-independence, the failure to dismantle these colonial legacies led to the internalization of colonial complexes among Indians. Woke consumer culture, neocolonialism meets wokeism. A previous piece by Hindudvesha analyzed the influence of wokeism on Indian youth. It discussed how wokeism has infiltrated the culture and social sphere of young people, especially those living in metropolitan cities like Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore. It noted how woke ideology has steadily infiltrated the cultural and social spaces of urban youth. While consumer trends 2 decades ago could largely be explained by crony capitalism, today these trends are increasingly shaped by wokeism, a strange alliance between capitalism and left-wing politics. The toxic blend of neocolonialism and wokeism has turned Indians into ideal targets for woke marketing gimmicks and ideological experiments. When deep-seated colonial complexes, marked by an irrational admiration for all things Western and a corresponding disdain for Bharatiya culture, intersect with the desire to appear progressive and socially aware, the result is a troubling cultural phenomenon. Indian traditions are increasingly vilified, while the language of social justice is exploited as a convenient facade to advance divisive and often harmful narratives. Woke advertising has made significant inroads into India in recent years. In May 2023, Starbucks India released an advertisement as part of a campaign promoting transgenderism. The ad, however, sparked widespread backlash for going beyond the message of respect and inclusivity for the transgender community. Instead, it was seen as implicitly endorsing sex change operations through a carefully crafted and emotionally manipulative storyline. The advertisement features a young woman named Arpita entering a cafe to meet her parents. As she sits down, her father asks the barista to write the name Arpita on the cup, revealing that she was formerly known as Arpit, their son. While the ad attempted to showcase acceptance and reconciliation, it subtly framed gender transition as a normalized and even encouraged process, without addressing the complex issues surrounding transgender healthcare, safety, or psychological well-being. As a result, it was criticized for importing the American-style woke narrative around gender identity into the Indian context, where such issues require far more cultural sensitivity and nuance. The ad faced widespread criticism from netizens who viewed it as an attempt to frivolously soft-sell the woke version of transgenderism in India and ruin middle-class families. Independent writer and columnist Shefali Vaidya pointed out the implicit anti-Hindu agenda of the ad, posing a rhetorical question to Starbucks if they would have dared to show an advertisement where Asif becomes Asifa or John turning into a Jane. In 2020, the renowned jewelry brand Tanishq ran an advertisement featuring an interfaith couple where a Muslim family had organized a baby shower for their Hindu daughter-in-law. The ad drew intense criticism from netizens, many of whom accused it of subtly promoting a love jihad narrative.
40 तक राज्य की मुस्लिम आबादी हिंदुओं के बराबर हो सकती है। उन्होंने 2011 की जनगणना का हवाला देते हुए बताया कि उस समय असम की आबादी में मुसलमान 34% थे, जिनमें से लगभग 31% प्रवासी थे। असम विधानसभा के उपाध्यक्ष नूमल मोमिन ने भी खुलासा किया कि आज राज्य के 15 जिले मुस्लिम बहुल हो चुके हैं, जबकि आजादी के समय एक भी जिला ऐसा नहीं था। उन्होंने इस स्थिति को बेहद चिंताजनक बताया। दूसरे राज्यों से कुछ उदाहरण यह भी दिखाते हैं कि हिंदू समाज का प्रतिरोध किस प्रकार से जनसांख्यिकी बदलाव के इन षड्यंत्रों पर कुछ हद तक अंकुश लगा सकता है। हिमाचल प्रदेश में 2024 में हिंदू समुदाय ने अवैध रूप से बनी मस्जिदों के खिलाफ प्रदर्शन किया, जिसके बाद नगर निगम की अदालत ने एक अवैध निर्माण की अतिरिक्त मंजिलों को गिराने का आदेश दिया। असम सरकार ने भी अवैध घुसपैठियों के खिलाफ सख्त रुख अपनाते हुए मूल निवासियों के अधिकारों की रक्षा की दिशा में सक्रिय कदम उठाए हैं। इसके विपरीत जिन क्षेत्रों में हिंदू समुदाय निष्क्रिय बना रहा, वहां हालात और अधिक बिगड़ते गए। जब लव जिहाद और लैंड जिहाद की रणनीतियां, वैश्विक आतंकी नेटवर्क से जुड़े स्थानीय मॉड्यूल्स का प्रसार और अनियंत्रित अवैध घुसपैठ, ये सभी इकाइयां आपस में मिल जाती हैं, तो पूरी स्थिति किसी भी समय फट सकने वाले टाइम बॉम्ब जितनी ही खतरनाक हो जाती है। यह घटनाक्रम केवल भारत के हिंदुओं
India's wedding planning industry is capitalizing on cultural insecurities by promoting trends like pre-wedding shoots, borrowed from the woke playbook, that have little to no relevance in traditional Indian culture. Wokeism has, in many ways, reduced the sacred Hindu wedding ceremony to a spectacle, where aesthetics is curated more for social media than for spiritual or familial meaning. A recent Times of India piece highlighted India's growing fake shaadi boom, a trend
दावे से जुड़ा है कि यह मस्जिद हरिहर मंदिर की जगह पर बनाई गई थी। कहा जाता है कि पहले मंदिर को ध्वस्त किया गया और उसके बाद वहां मस्जिद खड़ी की गई, और यह सब इस्लामी आक्रमणों के दौर में हुआ। मंदिर के विध्वंस की सटीक तिथि को लेकर विद्वानों में मतभेद है। कुछ विवरण इसे बलबन से सिकंदर लोदी के शासनकाल के बीच का बताते हैं, लेकिन इस तिथि को लेकर कोई स्पष्ट सहमति नहीं है। उल्लेखनीय है कि इतिहासकार श्रीराम शर्मा और मीनाक्षी जैन ने बाबर 1526 से 1530 के शासनकाल के दौरान संभल के एक प्राचीन मंदिर के विध्वंस के प्रमाणों का दस्तावेजीकरण किया है। संभल का उल्लेख प्राचीन ग्रंथों में मिलता है, जिनमें इसे हिंदू परंपरा के सबसे प्राचीन पवित्र स्थलों का दर्जा दिया गया है। क्षेत्र से मिले पुरातात्विक अवशेष इस जगह के हजारों साल से बसे होने का संकेत देते हैं और इस तरफ भी इशारा करते हैं कि यह क्षेत्र लगातार धार्मिक गतिविधियों का केंद्र रहा है। विशेषज्ञ मानते हैं कि संभल का मंदिर कम से कम 5000 साल पुराना है। संभल नाम का उल्लेख अलेक्जेंडर कार्लाइल
It is not merely a system of physical workouts, but a spiritual darshan philosophy in its own right. Yet, urban Indians largely prefer working out in Western-style gyms, often dismissing yoga as stretching exercises meant for the elderly. Fancy jargon like Pilates and bodyweight training now defines the fitness routine of Gen Z, most of whom remain unaware that many of these trendy, modern workouts are fundamentally rooted in classical yogic asanas. According to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, yoga is an 8-limbed path, Ashtanga, combining meditation, ethics, and devotion. Yoga has its roots in Vedic Agni, fire, rituals, and Upanishadic contemplation, 1500-500 BCE, later refined by Hindu rishis who
को और भी ज्यादा उकसाने वाली रही होगी। इस विरासत का विध्वंस केवल एक ढांचे का नाश नहीं था, बल्कि संभल की हिंदू पहचान को मिटाने का एक सोचा समझा प्रयास था। फिर भी, यदि संभल के हिंदू अतीत का लोप पतन और विस्थापन की पीड़ा भरी कथा कहता है, तो आज उसकी सभ्यतागत और सांस्कृतिक पुनर्जागरण की संभावना एक बिल्कुल अलग कथा लिख सकती है। एक ऐसी कहानी जो संभल के हिंदुओं के लिए जनसांख्यिकीय और आध्यात्मिक पुनर्निर्माण का प्रतीक बने। समापन संभल आज उस सच्चाई का प्रतीक है जिसे नजरअंदाज करना असंभव है। यह सिर्फ एक स्थानीय मुद्दा नहीं है, बल्कि पूरे भारत की तस्वीर है जहां हिंदुओं को डराया धमकाया जाता है, उनके त्योहारों पर रोक लगाई जाती है और उन्हें अपने ही घरों में असुरक्षित महसूस कराया जाता है। इसके पीछे दशकों से चली आ रही वही विलुप्तीकरण की राजनीति है, जो धर्मनिरपेक्षता के नाम पर केवल हिंदुओं से उनके बुनियादी अधिकार छीनती रही है। यही राजनीति आज भारत की सभ्यतागत अस्मिता के लिए सबसे बड़ा खतरा बन चुकी है। लेकिन इस अंधकार में भी उम्मीद की किरण है। संभल में दिख रहा सांस्कृतिक और सभ्यतागत पुनर्जागरण इस बात का सबूत है कि हिंदू समाज अब चुप नहीं बैठेगा। राज्य सरकार और स्थानीय प्रशासन ने इस दिशा में महत्वपूर्ण कदम उठाए, पर असली ताकत स्थानीय हिंदुओं की सक्रिय भागीदारी से ही आई है। समाज और संगठन मिलकर खड़े हुए, आवाज उठाई और जन जागरण चलाया।
Marks. It's a telling symptom of colonized minds. The inability of Bhartiyas to recognize the greatness and depth of their own cultural practices paves the way for Western appropriation of Hindu spiritual systems like yoga. Ironically, once yoga is rebranded as mindfulness or Pilates, elite Indians are often the first to queue up and pay for these repackaged services. The ancient Indian science of Ayurveda, routinely snubbed by elite Indians for supposedly lacking in scientific method, has also been appropriated by the West in numerous ways. Many Indians dismiss Ayurvedic practitioners as quacks, mocking age-old Ayurvedic remedies that use spices readily available in Indian kitchens. Yet they swoon the moment a Western brand repackages an Ayurvedic staple and markets it as a groundbreaking scientific discovery. The humble haldi or turmeric, a common ingredient in Indian households, stands out as a prime example. For generations, Indian families have relied on turmeric milk to treat a wide range of ailments, from the common cold to wound healing. However, many urban Indians wrinkle their noses at the mention of indigenous remedies, yet go gaga over turmeric lattes or health booster drinks with a dash of turmeric promoted by international brands. Another good example of this phenomenon is the recent controversy surrounding international luxury brand Prada's presentation of a slipper that resembles India's traditional Kolhapuri chappals. Prada chose to copy the design of Kolhapuri chappals, but did not credit the craft or acknowledge the roots of its design. This led to enormous criticism from various stakeholders, including Indian artisans, trade bodies, and politicians. A red-faced Prada was eventually forced to acknowledge the inspiration behind its design. It's not the first time that a well-known global luxury brand has stolen or appropriated Indian art and craft traditions without giving due acknowledgement. However, the irony is that many of these luxury creations, which blatantly plagiarize Indian arts and crafts, end up in the wardrobes or homes of elite Indians who would relentlessly heckle and bargain with a local craftsperson but wouldn't think twice before shelling out 1 Indian rupee lakh for a pair of Prada Kolhapuri chappals. However, nothing exposes the deep-seated inferiority complex of Indians more brutally than social media.
Trends.
When foreigners, more precisely white foreigners, praise Indian culture or make reels showcasing local traditions, they are showered with overwhelming admiration, which, incidentally, might explain why so many Westerners have suddenly reinvented themselves as influencers on Indian culture. But if a brown-skinned person creates similar content, the response is far more muted. It's a telling sign that we still need a foreign stamp to value what's ours. Wrapping up, the lingering colonial mindset among Indians remains one of the greatest obstacles to fully realizing the potential of India's ongoing civilizational and cultural resurgence. Globally, the rise of wokeism has further amplified anti-Hindu narratives. Its entry into India, under the guise of promoting social justice and progressive values, has made Indians increasingly susceptible to a toxic blend of woke ideology and colonial baggage. There is no quick solution to these deeply rooted distortions in our collective consciousness. They can only be corrected from within. Yet, there is hope that the current civilizational awakening will help steer this transformation in a meaningful and lasting way.